Can you beat Orcs Must Die 1 without using any traps? This is a question that just randomly popped into my mind when I was playing the game. After thinking about it for a few seconds, I realized that there is literally an achievement for beating a level in Act 1 or Act 2 without using any traps. So this would technically seem possible, and that is exactly why I'm making this video, to find out the answer to this question. Now before we begin, I just want to say that if you have never played Orcs Must Die 1, then I recommend playing it, as it is an amazing game, and it is definitely my favorite game of all time. I will not be showing any of the cutscenes, and I will be narrating over the actual gameplay, so you do not need to worry about any spoilers. And with that out of the way, we can get to it. I am H, and you are watching my channel. First things first, we have to establish the rules. They are going to be very simple. Rule number 1, no using any traps. That kinda explains itself. However, what is considered a trap may not be so obvious. A trap would be something that we place down and it has a certain effect on the orcs. So for example, the arrow wall will shoot arrows when the orcs enter its range. There are traps like the boom barrel, with which you have to interact in order for it to have some effect. However, it itself is still considered a trap. Now of course, there are things like the mana well that one might argue is not a trap, as its use is to give the player mana and not hurt the orcs, but I will still consider it a trap. However, there are two things in the spellbook that cost coins, can be placed, and hurt the orcs, but are not considered traps. Those two being the archers and the paladins. The archers kind of explain themselves, and the paladins are soldiers that wield swords. These two are placed by default on some maps, which makes them a wonderful asset to have. You may think that they'd count as traps, but the game considers both the archers and the paladins as separate entities from the traps, and as such I will allow myself to use them, but that's the only thing I can buy from the spellbook. They also both appear after we finish a few levels, which means that until I get them I have to fend for myself. Rule number 2. Any weapons and weaver upgrades are allowed. The spellbook upgrade system only allows us to upgrade traps, rendering it useless for this challenge. However, there are the weavers, which also offer upgrades but within individual levels, using the coins we accumulate in them, unlike the skulls in the spellbook that we get for completing a level. I will explain in detail what the weavers are when we get to them. Rule number 3. DLC weapons are also allowed. The DLCs offer a bunch of traps, weapons, and 5 extra levels. And since using the traps would obviously defeat the whole purpose of this challenge, I will not be using them. But I will allow myself to use the DLC weapons since they are very useful. That is all the rules out of the way, and we can get right to the gameplay. First level, the hallway. We start with the first level of the game, that being the hallway. Now, since this is the first level of the game, it is understandably very easy, and I had no problem beating it first try. I'd even say that it's actually faster to do it without traps than spending time setting them up. However, there is something important to mention. This level gives us our first two weapons, the crossbow and the blade staff. Both of these are going to be very important to the entire run. The crossbow is the default weapon of the game and literally cannot be removed, but that is not really a problem since I consider it to be the single best weapon in the entire game, as the ability to headshot is very useful. The blade staff is also going to be helpful for mowing down orcs. Thanks to the DLC, I also have the Alchemist's Satchel, a weapon with the ability to throw acid bombs. This is also going to be a very important weapon for the run, as it can kill large groups of orcs with the press of just 2 buttons. The DLC also gives me access to the Vampire Gauntlet. which is very useful, especially against flying enemies, which we will encounter later, but now it works as an easy way to replenish health when needed. Second level, Fork. This is the first level where we encounter the paladins, who have been placed here by the developers to help us defend the rifts, but in all honesty, it's not like the orcs will even get to him. I will explain how they work when we actually get the ability to deploy them from our spellbook. Of course, since this is the second level of the game, it is also very easy, so moving on to third level, the Corner. There really isn't anything important to note with this level, as again it is very easy. What is important to say is that this level introduces the Crossbow Orc, one of the few long-range orcs we will encounter in the game, who, as the name implies, shoots fire arrows from a crossbow. Fourth level, the Baths. In this level we are given the wind belt to use from our spellbook. The wind belt is useful for throwing orcs down pits of acid and lava. However, as it is not exactly a weapon I enjoy using, it remains virtually unused, with the exception for a few key moments with many orcs that are conveniently walking right next to a pit. Fifth level, Runner's Alley. Here it is, the level that grants us the archer into our spellbook. It also introduces the most annoying enemy in the entire game, that being the Kobold Runner, or just Kobold for short. The Kobolds are small and very fast enemies that die of one shot, which might make you think that they'd be easy to deal with. And while that is true in most scenarios, the game throws a lot of them at you at the same time, meaning you have to deal with all of them quickly before they get to the rift, which is the only thing they do, as they cannot even harm the player. After this level, we can upgrade the archer, which makes them cheaper by a few hundred coins, which will be very useful, especially in the early game. Sixth level, Overpass. Not much to say for this level, as my notes on it literally say also very easy, but I will mention that this level gives us the barricades, which allow us to force the path that the orcs will go through, and since it technically doesn't hurt the orcs, it was one of the traps that I've considered actually allowing. However, I had ultimately decided against it, as the game itself still considers it a trap. 7th level, Twin Holes. First level of the game that actually poses a bit of a challenge, as the two holes in this level are quite the way away from each other, which meant that I had to be running between them a lot. It is also the first time where I managed to max out the Guardian limit, and it certainly won't be the last. This level also introduces one of the most formidable enemies in the whole game, the Ogre. A big, slow enemy that stuns you if he manages to hit you. Just spamming a few headshots will do the job of taking him out though. 8th level, Lunch Break. A level I thought would pose difficulty, as my usual strategy with this level includes a heavy usage of barricades. However, I ended up realizing that this whole level is so simple that the barricades actually prolongate the level. 9th level, The Stream. I hadn't expected this level to be difficult, and it wasn't. This level is designed for the heavy use of archers, which I took full advantage of. It also introduces the first of the 3 flying enemies in the entire game, the Hellbat, a slow flying enemy that spits fireballs when you get into its range. Thankfully, they are quite large and so are easy to shoot down. They also come in packs of only a few, which makes them not really a threat. 10th level, Sludge Hole. I had expected this level to be very easy, and while it was, one orc had managed to escape in the first wave as I didn't notice that he ran off. This is the end of the first act. Now we move on to the second act, and things are about to get much more interesting. 11th level, Chaos Chamber. This level was very easy and uninteresting. However, what is interesting is the 2 things that are introduced here. One is the Gnoll Hunter, a very fast enemy with a quite considerable amount of health that cannot enter rifts, but instead they hunt down guardians and the player. Right now they are easy to deal with, but they will become a bigger problem as more of them will run in at the same time. The more important thing here is that we get the Weavers, one of the most useful things we have. The Weavers allow us to upgrade things like weapons, spells, traps and guardians with the coins we get in the level. Right now, we only have 2 Weavers. One is for traps and guardians and the other one is for spells and weapons. Now, it would seemingly make more sense for us to use the Spell Weaver, however, thanks to the regeneration upgrade for all guardians, which is great for keeping guardians alive, which we will require a lot in the later levels, the Trap Weaver is a bit more useful. 12th level, Choke Point. I had originally expected this level to be a bit more difficult, however, thanks to the fact that all the orcs coming out of the 3 entrances converge on the bridge, which, as the name implies, is a choke point, it is actually very easy to kill all the orcs, since they are all in a big bunch. We also get the Flame Bracers, which will be very useful mainly against kobolds, because its secondary ability creates a firewall which kills kobolds when they get near it, and the primary ability creates a fireball, which will be very useful against frost ogres that we will encounter later. 13th level, the Arena. This is the first level I thought would be very difficult, but it actually ended up being pretty run-of-the-mill in terms of difficulty. 3 orcs ended up escaping as I didn't notice them when they ran away. 14th level, the Balcony. Now, we have finally been authorized the Ice Amulet, which is going to be a very important weapon for us for the whole game, as its ability to freeze orcs in place comes in handy when dealing with ogres and gnoll hunters. It is especially wonderful when used against flying enemies, as one hit sends them flying straight down at the ground. 15th level, the Tower. Here comes my favorite level of the whole game. It also authorizes us with one of the most useful traps in the entire game, the Brimstone. Unfortunately, we obviously cannot use it, as that will break the spirit of the whole challenge. This level also includes an abhorrent amount of ogres. Like, Jesus holy Christ! The last 4 waves are absolutely filled with them. However, in the end I managed to pull through, mainly because this level is designed for heavy use of archers, as well as including the ballista, an amazing weapon for destroying ogres that is pre-placed in a few levels by the developers. 16th level, the Library. The library has 2 entrances from 2 opposite directions, as well as having 2 rifts also in opposite directions. This makes it very important to strategize. The first couple of ways have you focusing on just one door, however, when the other door opens we are introduced to the Fire Ogre. That is of course no problem for us, thanks to the Ice Amulet we have. However, after this wave, orcs start coming from both directions, making it very important for us to focus on killing orcs coming from one direction very quickly, and then doing the same with the other door, also very quickly. Now, at first I assumed that this would be very easy to do, and while the killing part was no problem, the doing it fast part was, as the orcs do not come out all at once, instead coming out in smaller groups over the course of one wave, forcing me to wait for others to come out, which of course considerably slows me down. This all put together results in a mashup of me running after the orcs that are almost at the rifts. In the end, it came up a lot better than I had originally expected, as only 1 orc had escaped. 17th level, the Bridge. Here we have it. Finally, we have been given the Paladin, whom we will be using continuously in every level from now on. The Paladin is amazing for taking out smaller groups of orcs, and in a group they can even handle taking out an ogre. If necessary, they can also be used to slow down incoming orcs and give us time to react accordingly. This level also introduces the Kobold Sapper. It's basically a kobold with a boom barrel on his back. Stay away from these, as getting close to them will result in almost certain death. The level itself was very easy, even though many flying enemies were present, and the sapper spam gets a bit too hectic sometimes, as unlike regular kobolds, sappers don't chase the rift, but the player, barricades and guardians. That last one is of course a major problem for us, and the sole reason why I consider them quite a big threat, as they have no problem wiping up an entire legion of guardians within seconds. After the bridge, it was also pretty obvious that I should upgrade the paladin, as the price reduction is quite big. 18th level, Killing Fields. The last level of Act 2 brings us here, and honestly, the goodbye from Act 2 feels more like a go f*** yourself than anything else. I just want to say that I personally really hate this level. I don't actually even know why, I just find it so annoying, as it feels more like a chore to finish. Going into this level, I knew it wasn't going to be very easy. However, in the end, I was pleasantly surprised, as it actually wasn't as difficult as I had imagined it. This is thanks to the fact that this level features ramps, made for archers to shoot down orcs from. It also includes very tight pathways for the orcs, which makes it easy for paladins to mow them down, as it takes just 3 paladins to completely barricade one of these pathways. This level also introduces the Armored Ogre. He has the most HP in the entire game, taking a lot of headshots to kill. Right now, the most of them that the game will introduce is 2 in the last wave, which is doable, but this will get a lot worse. In the end, 5 orcs had managed to escape, as my ability to be at 2 places at the same time was not good enough for this. 19th level, Rebirth. Rebirth was a bit of a tricky one. The level includes 1 rift, but 3 ways for orcs to actually get there. The first few waves pose no threat, as only one of the doors is open, but after the first pause, it gets kinda hectic. For most of the level, only the 2 other doors are active. However, the last couple of waves do have all of them active at the same time. This is when chaos ensued for me, as I focused on the middle lane, and when that was done, I jumped over to the right lane and took care of it easily. But of course, thinking that everything would go according to plan would be absolutely foolish. The paladins on the left lane were overwhelmed, and in the end, 9 orcs had escaped into the rift. This level also introduces the Goblin Shaman, which can resurrect any orcs and ogres, which is very threatening. That means that we have to kill them very quickly, and when I say very quickly, I mean very quickly. Because these guys can resurrect other shamans, and they often come in packs, which just increases the difficulty even more. That, in and of itself, would be enough to make this level into an important part of our playthrough. However, that is not all, as we also get the Knowledge Weaver, which is undeniably the best weaver in the game. The other 2 may be more useful in certain scenarios, but this one is more powerful than the 2 of them. This weaver offers very powerful upgrades, including the Rift's own defensive sphere, as well as the orcs rising up from the dead to fight for you, and a lot more upgrades. 20th level, Gateway. This level, despite having 3 entrances, is actually very easy, considering ground enemies only come from the central door, and even then, they all continue on a bridge and converge in a choke point, which makes them easily manageable. Then there are 2 floors through which orcs can go, which is another plus for us, as if something screws up, we can easily fix it. As previously mentioned, there are 2 more doors. Through these 2 doors, flying enemies descend on us and fly around the castle into the rift on the top floor. Thankfully, the castle has more than enough spots for archers, and while in most waves I had to help them get rid of the flyers, in the last few waves they managed to do it all on their own, making this surprisingly an easy level considering the fact that we are so close to the finale. 21st level, Hard Climb. This level is split into 2 identical paths from the doors to the rifts. Going up this path, orcs cross a few pre-placed archers and 2 ballistas, just to encounter a paladin on each side standing in front of the rest. Then there is the middle, where so many flyers go through. Thankfully, the flying enemies can be taken care of fairly easily by stacking a bunch of archers up there and occasionally going to help them. The orcs going down the 2 paths are in another story though, because these 2 paths are basically devoid of any walls, and the walls that are here are virtually unusable as they are so far away from the paths of the orcs, which render any wall traps useless. Of course, that isn't a problem for us, because we are not going to be using any traps. There are a few ways you can go around beating this level. However, I decided to spam archers until the top was so full of them that there was nowhere else to place them. Also putting 4 archers in the rift room to stop any kobolds from running away, and spamming paladins until I reached the guardian limit. This actually ended up working amazingly, and I was able to finish the level with only 1 orc running off, as at the time I was dealing with orcs on the other side, and the paladins on their side were overwhelmed. 22nd level, the Squeeze. This level was generally more difficult, as I had to run between 2 paths. Thankfully, this was made easier because the developers had pre-placed teleporters, which I used a lot. The lower path was honestly no problem, since I just placed paladins and archers to deal with it. However, on the upper path, it was a bit more problematic, as I was left with only 2 archers and 3 paladins.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't. But I've considered it.
Okay, so this spot. This spot is absolute bull. Thanks to this candelabrum being placed so close to the wall and this not being clipped at all, if you accidentally fall into this spot like I did, you cannot get out, like at all. So here you have me, on the second to last wave, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm fucked, aren't I? But then, a beacon of hope shined from above. A thing that I have never explained is that the Vampire Gauntlet's secondary ability is to convert health to mana. Now, of course, the developers placed a measure for you to not be able to kill yourself with that ability, but you are able to bring yourself to very low health. The reason why this is useful is because I noticed that I was attracting the attention of orcs to my spot every time that I jumped. This was of course completely useless with normal orcs, but I knew that the last wave has an ogre come out, so I jumped up and down like a madman until the ogre one-shot me and I was able to get out. So yeah, the ability to finish this level with a perfect score was shattered because of an oversight here. But I probably shouldn't actually complain too much, because as we will learn, oversights in this game can be very helpful, and they will be very important in the finale. 23rd level, Stairs of Doom. Well, this level. Now, I'll be honest with you. In my opinion, this is the hardest level of the game. Never mind that it isn't the finale. The thing is, with the finale, once you have a system in place, it's actually quite easy to get past it, and while that is of course possible here, it is much harder than in the finale, because the path the orcs have to go through is much shorter, and with only guardians at our disposal, everything is much more difficult. Throughout the whole game, I was using archers more than paladins. This will be the first and one of only 2 instances where this will happen, as while there is this bridge which would be perfect for them, the front simply doesn't cover enough ground to even consider putting archers there as a good investment, which is why I put them more in the back instead. In the end, I ended up placing more paladins anyway, as in all honesty, their ability to hold orcs while I dispose of them made my life so much easier. In the end, it took quite some time, effort and skill to beat this level without traps, A small mistake on my end meant that an ogre was able to stun me, and in the end 9 orcs were allowed to escape. But honestly, with how difficult this turned out to be, I'm surprised that it wasn't even more. 24th level, Finale. And here we are, the last level of the game. This is the final test where we find out if it's actually possible to beat Orcs Must Die without using any traps. Now, right as I had entered the level, I had realized that one thing makes this a bit more complicated than expected. That being that there aren't actually many spots for archers, which is why this ended up being the second level where I used paladins more than archers. As you can see, the level gives us 4 directions where the orcs will come from, and there are 2 doors in each direction. This may seem very scary, however, unlike the Stairs of Doom, there is a system to which the orcs come out here, and they don't just rush in from all doors at once. They only do that in the final wave. Thankfully, there is a thing that makes this a bit easier. These little outposts, where the archers and ballistas are positioned, attract orcs if you stand on the edges, and since they are down there, they cannot attack you. This is even more useful with the sappers, as when they hunt you, they will all get into this one spot, which means that you can literally just one-shot them. This actually goes even further, as these outposts are literally untouchable. The orcs cannot even enter them through the entrance, which means that you can practically hide here when you need to. Now of course, this is all really useful when the orcs go from the 2 directions these outposts are actually in, but for the others it is useless, which obviously forces us to do something. I mowed down the orcs through most of the ways with no issues. I've had a bit of a problem finding them sometimes, as they really like to run around and hide, but overall it wasn't difficult. However, then we get to the final wave. And the final wave, well, it's not very easy. Ogres come from all directions, and you have to pick where to start. And pray to God that paladins can distract the others for long enough. I had managed to clear out 2 directions from which the ogres were coming from, however, one ogre had managed to escape while I was stunned while fighting another ogre. And the second one had managed to escape while I killed an ogre and was just running for the last one, but didn't get to him in time. Overall, we ended up losing 10 skulls from 2 ogres, otherwise there were no issues. And that is that. The question from the beginning of this video can officially be answered with a yes, as we had managed to prove that it is indeed possible to beat Orcs Must Die without using any traps. Thank you so much for watching this video, as it is my first video and I had a lot of fun making it, as it was an amazing way to relive my favorite game of all time. So, among other things, I definitely plan on doing this kind of video again. I also plan on someday doing a playthrough of the DLC, which of course is going to be much shorter, but considering that most of the DLC levels are harder than the main game, I'd say that it could be a lot of fun. And if you guys really enjoy this, I might even try the second game, which honestly might be more interesting because of all the new weapons, trinkets and much more. So, I once again thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, I'd really be happy if you left a like. And if you want to see more videos like this, then subscribe to the channel. Also, if you have any suggestions for how I should improve my videos, or what you'd perhaps like to see from me next time, you can leave a comment. This was H, and I'll see you all again next time on my channel.